Welcome back from the recess. I hope you're all energized up with food and drinks. And there'll be more of that. But first, some presentation that I look forward to a lot. So without further ado, I introduce Piotr Jas, who's been with BlaBlaCar for as long as we have.
Years.
More, 12 years. Without further ado, over to you.
Thanks, Per. Thanks for hosting me here. Even though I'm here replacing our CEO, who couldn't make it, hopefully next event you'd be able to also meet him, as it was last time in Paris. We'll try to share a few words about BlaBlaCar, about our performance, about the vision we have, and I'm sure that most of you know what BlaBlaCar is, yet I will start with a bit of an intro of what we do, why we do. What's the vision of BlaBlaCar is basically become the go-to marketplace for shared travel, and how we approach that topic. So I don't know if you are aware of all those figures, but basically most of transportation happens, most of people traveling between cities actually use their own cars to travel by cars. And it's very much the same whether it's an emerging market or developed market. It's also not very dependent on the development of the transportation network in a country. We have countries with very developed rail network or bus network, and still most of people take cars to travel between cities. No surprise. I think that no of the transportation network can cover entire country with a granular network enough to cater all people's needs. On top of that, and that's the figure that actually started all the development of BlaBlaCar, most of those cars travel empty. And I'm not referring here to trips that happen around big cities, commuting trips. I'm referring to long distance trips. For those long distance trips, even though you might associate them with a family traveling in a car full of luggage and kids yelling there, it's actually two people traveling in a car. And to add to that, actually transportation is responsible for most of the global CO2 emissions. And within that, actually road transportation is a vast majority. So a lot of people talk about planes actually contributing a lot to global CO2 emissions. If you look at the contribution, actually it's road transportation, and actually it's a lot about passenger transportation, not freight transportation. So those figures are a background of the problem we are trying to tackle. And how we're doing that? So basically, there are three pillars that BlaBlaCar is built around. Basically, we aggregate supply. In first place, we aggregate supply of carpoolers. So globally, in 23, we had 7 million people who were sharing their seats in the car and accepting passengers to travel with them. We also aggregate bus operators. So we're trying to optimize their business by maximizing the load factor of those buses, maximizing how they fill up seats in their buses globally. For that, we connected through our tech layer 4,000 bus operators globally, and we're still expanding that in other markets. And we are working on connecting train operators. So here we mentioned that we launched Spain in 24. It's pretty much already happening because we sold first tickets over last 2 weeks in Spain. So it's live in Spain, although if you land on Spanish BlaBlaCar platform, you might not find them because it's still being gradually rolled out. So I'm not lying here, but it's happening. We also developed a fairly unique tech to enable that. I don't know if any of you played with BlaBlaCar app. Might look like very straightforward to match a passenger with a driver or with a bus operator. Where most of the magic actually happens is where a regular passenger connects with a regular driver. And it's fairly difficult to actually match people. It's something that BlaBlaCar was developing over the last 15 years. I joined the company in 2012, and back then it was already like a fairly complex tech solution to be built, but it was more resembling a classified. Now it's a very advanced tech engine that helps to match people that travel along the way. When passenger is searching for a route between two places which driver haven't planned to stop at, and then they finally meet and travel. It's magic, and it's actually generating most of the growth of BlaBlaCar through a positive word of mouth. I'll show it later. So on passenger side, as I say, there is a really sleek app that people are evaluating as a very, very positive experience. All that is built thanks to a significant team of engineers, which actually are more than 40% of the staff, and that's what we always relied on. No matter of like what were the bumps on the road, actually we invested heavily in building this tech platform and this team that is at the core of BlaBlaCar. And then shifting to another pillar, which is the users, the passengers that are traveling thanks to our platform. We provide a affordable, cheap, environmentally friendly and solution that actually has a very strong brand. You would see it on the next slides. That's how it looks like. I mean, it might be looking fairly straightforward and nothing specific. What's really important is behind that. As you can see in France, you can basically find on any particular route drivers who are offering their rides. You can find buses and trains. When you look at outside of Europe market, you would see that we aggregate majority of the bus offering and combine it with the carpool offers from our own drivers. So what's the ambition based on what I just shared? Basically, when you look at the global market, you have, when you look at the transportation, hotels, you would see that there are global leaders in almost every vertical now. For city transportation, you'd have Uber. For hotels, you have Booking.com. For shared accommodation, you would have Airbnb. But when you look at intercity transportation, there is no player which is aggregating all these offerings globally. So you'd find local champions, local regional leaders on buses, on trains. There is one clearly known for being a leader on carpooling, which is named BlaBlaCar. But there's no one who is aggregating all of that globally, and that's our ambition. That's what we aim at. That's what we already started to build, and we are actually in some markets. When you look at Brazil, we are the only player that aggregates all the bus offering, carpool offering, and enables passengers to go for that experience on one app. So how carpooling works, I maybe mentioned that because even though you seem to know BlaBlaCar very well, still people sometimes mistake it make a mistake of associating that with ride-hailing apps. I think there is a huge difference between what BlaBlaCar does and those solutions do. BlaBlaCar is built around a cost-sharing concept. So basically, we technically prevent people from generating profit on the platform, and it's very important. It's actually a paradigm that helps us to be a platform that's not under scrutiny of regulators because of this simple reason. Like basically the activity on the platform is not meant to generate profit. It's meant to have a cost sharing platform. So when you as a driver is publishing a ride, I know from Stockholm to Göteborg, and you know that the fuel would cost you 80 euros, basically if you find 3 passengers, they would contribute by 60 euro to your cost of this route. And that's it. This attracts non-professional supply. This enables passengers to have a very transactional experience on the platform. Basically find a driver, book a ride, and travel together, and in most countries pay online for that booking. And given what I shown in the earlier slides, actually there is almost infinite network to scale that, because even though we became a global leader, I think we are tackling like 10%, 20% of the use cases of what our drivers are doing. So even within the driver base we have, we still can expand their use cases so that they can publish more trips and take more passengers. And of course, there are much more drivers that we have never attracted to our platform, and we still can do that in existing geographies, and beyond that, expanding to new countries. What's interesting is that actually the experience of the product, as I said, it's very unique, and once people successfully match on our platform, they really love the product, love the brand, and it creates like a extremely viral growth based on very positive word of mouth. So when you look at our traffic on the platform, basically 95% of this traffic is direct. People type BlaBlaCar or open the app. We don't need to invest in acquiring drivers, because the story is simple. Like the driver travel once with some passengers, he or she would see that they can offset half or even all the costs of what they expense for their journey, And that's a very great story to tell to your friends, family, and then attract new users. On passenger side, it's the same. When you're a passenger, you would find the ride on an axis, on a route which you cannot find any other mean of transportation, and you feel like you were saved by BlaBlaCar. So that's a very viral product, and it attracts a lot of usage. So that's a fairly unique aspect of the product. On an opposite side, you would have a bigger challenge when attracting bus passengers because the experience is not so obvious. So I think the combining carpool with bus is great, but having only bus on your platform, it's a commodity. It's not sexy. If you buy a train ticket, you would not call your friend and say, "Wow, it was a great experience. I booked it on train app." It doesn't sound like that. On carpool, you can say it. So that's a unique value of BlaBlaCar. And we are shifting actually from this carpool core, which will be always unique, and I think we can grow it. And as you would see, we still grow it in existing geographies. But we are adding a new mean of transportation, bus. So since 2019, we've been growing that space. And actually, that's mostly growing outside of Europe, although in Western Europe, we have some of the bus offering as well. What we focus though on in Western Europe is actually the mean of transportation that dominates there, which is train. So when you look at the transportation landscape, like carpool would be a niche compared to train, and it's obvious. Like for converting to carpool, you need to change people's habits, convince them that it's something cool, it's something that provides value for you. But in those cases, you would take a train, and I think that's where we want to tap into wallet of people whom we already have on our platform, so who are traveling with us, and increase their frequency by adding on top of one train trip, a carpool trip, like 3 or 4 train trips over the year. So that's what I mentioned. We still are growing very fast in markets which we call unmonetized, which is a future revenue potential and a BDA potential of the company. Those markets grow still very, very fast. Amongst them, Brazil, India, Mexico is the ones that contribute to this growth. And as I said, this market does not require any investments in terms of marketing, in terms of team on the ground. This is a very light asset, low operationally heavy business. What is planned for next years, as I mentioned, is that those markets would be monetized, and the monetization of how we plan to do it, and how we already did it in several markets like Ukraine, Central Eastern Europe, is that we are adding a service fee for passengers who are just simply paying that in the process of booking a trip. We already proven that in Ukraine and CE. Now, fine-tuning still the product because I think that it can be improved. We will be scaling that in Brazil, then India, then Mexico. On top of that, what we're benefiting from, thanks to this carpool growth, is that all those incremental users that are being added on carpool, they are converting in certain extent to bus usage. So if you add 15 million carpool passengers, and if in those markets you have a bus offering on your platform, these people will convert to bus tickets without any investments. So like you don't need to pay for marketing to acquire a bus passenger. You just simply tell your existing carpool users that from now onwards they can buy a bus ticket on your platform, and that's also a quite heavy and a strong growth lever that we can leverage in the future. So also, what I mentioned earlier is the synergies that actually carpool generates when combined with buses and trains. So we ran a study that enabled us to prove actually the incremental value that you can have, which sounds very intuitive. Like if you add new offering, then people would start buying bus tickets or train tickets on your platform, and it increases their lifetime value. Frequency, lifetime value, and then brings additional value. But why it happens? So these networks that we run, one carpooling, as you can see in France, you can have like a almost infinite amount of meeting points at which passengers and drivers can meet for carpooling. They are very complementary to a very, very scarce network of bus stations or even train stations. And basically, you would not cannibalize your train or bus offering when you're selling that on your platform by carpool, because they usually run as something that supplements each other. And on top of that, as you would see on the later slides, it can also build like intermodal trips. So without going into many details, basically what we've proven is that if we haven't added bus offering on our platform in France, our gross margin would have been lower by 7% if we compared to a scenario where we have it, and that's the case. So we run a bus network in France as well. We've done similar study for Brazil, and the numbers are very similar. It's just the numbers from France are more recent. We have more timeline to analyze that, but what we see in Brazil is very much similar. And again, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but I think it's good to prove it with numbers. On top of that, I think that there are aspects which are very relevant, which I haven't mentioned so far that much, which is that usage on our platform is actually helping to reduce carbon emissions or increasing energy efficiency of the entire economy. Because what is happening is that instead of traveling in two cars, people are switching into one car for a long distance trip, or they are shifting from using their own car to using buses, and that's the same, taking cars off the road and increasing the overall efficiency. And actually, thanks to the models we proven that we can generate those savings. What we can do out of it is actually we can also generate business in the future. We're looking into carbon credit schemes where we could actually monetize that as well. What's important is that actually when you look at other transportation networks, you don't think about them as something that generates human connections. And actually, what I mentioned earlier, BlaBlaCar is very unique. So passenger and driver connecting in the car is very different than a very transactional nature of you traveling by train or car. And actually, we build a lot of those connections, and that's also feeds the growth and helps to have the fully organic growth of the platform. And the last point I already mentioned is that if you look at the network we create, you can, in every country, you can identify numerous points where people can travel, which increases the mobility in the country, and it's very important. Summarizing, I think we are a marketplace which is commission based, with asset free, and we have a great model that generates revenues thanks to energy savings and potentially carbon savings in the future. Maybe tapping a bit into the numbers. I know that's what's really interesting for you. Those are not surprising figures, I guess, because they were disclosed earlier. I can dig deeper into that. So here you can see revenue and EBITDA results of the company over last couple of years. You'd see that there is a clear dip during COVID, because we maintained most of our teams and preserved most of the activity, investing in the rebound post-COVID. And as you can see, this demonstrate a very strong operating leverage. So once we have activity rebounding on our platform, we can demonstrate very quickly a rebound of gross margin, and then it grows quite quickly to EBITDA. Carpool business itself is very profitable in terms of gross margins, like 85%. So as long as you would see the rebound of usage there, you would see this this flowing into EBITDA. And as I mentioned, this does not reflect potential markets which were not monetized. So their activity were increasing. You don't see it here. You don't see it in revenue. You don't see it in EBITDA. But once we start monetizing them, you can expect the same efficiency of flow of from activity to revenue to EBITDA. There are a couple of events that are worth mentioning. We recently secured additional financing, which helps us to think about next steps of expansion, which would be mostly focused on financing M&A targets. And I will mention a few words about that. It adds on top of very strong position the company already had. So over the years, we managed to preserve a quite strong war chest. It, in combination with this financing, helps us to think about a strong M&A pipeline. So I will maybe in three slides present how we plan next couple of years with the company. So on the core part of the platform, as I said, it's a unique asset. It's something that we have no competition around. I think that this should not prevent us from innovating in this space. I personally, being at BlaBlaCar for 12 years, I feel that there is still a lot of things we can develop, starting with pricing. Our platform has, I've heard during earlier presentations, questions about pricing. Our platform has very basic pricing, and there's a huge lever for optimizations. Just so far, we've been optimizing other parts of product, but now I believe we can invest into that. So on our platform, the only things we do with price, we cap the price and we recommend it to drivers, and that let the drivers set the price themselves. Not very intelligent, but that's how it worked for a while. I think that we can implement much smarter solutions around pricing. Of course, we would roll out monetization in markets which were not monetized. And we can still optimize take rate to meet a sweet spot between like a passenger's intent to pay and revenue. This should generate still a decent growth of revenue. This has a high gross margin, as I mentioned. And here I think that the execution risk is fairly low, because that's what bread and butter of what BlaBlaCar was doing since 15 years. Next thing is something that we already started. That's happening. That's reality. We sell bus tickets. We sell train tickets, as you've heard in Spain. We sell bus tickets at scale in numerous markets. So the idea is to grow that further, to become a leading platform for selling bus tickets in every market we operate, and to, of course, become a single multimodal marketplace for road transportation. Here, we believe that that's the good place where we can invest in M&As. And we identified several targets. And those are usually companies that are profitable. So they are only profitable companies. They're usually around 40-50 million revenue. And we have a lineup of a couple of them, and discussions with them are progressing, so stay tuned. That can generate stronger revenue growth. That has a slightly lower gross margin, still fairly decent, above 50%. Here, the execution risk is slightly higher because we compete with players that are existent on the market. That's not a core expertise of BlaBlaCar historically. So that's something that we started to develop. I think that there is a lot to iterate. I have high confidence that we can deliver, but we should mention that there is some higher risk than on the earlier type of products. Speaking about M&A targets, I already revealed a bit around that. They are profitable. They are bus or train OTAs, so very focused on this segment because it fits into the expansion strategy that I just laid out. And they still expected to grow their revenues, and they are profitable. So they should not tap into our cash resources. And last item, which is something that's I would say a newest innovation at BlaBlaCar, which we started to look into 2 years ago. It's how to unlock high frequency transportation. So BlaBlaCar, when I refer to bus or a carpool, is mostly low frequency usage. It's like 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 trips per year for passenger, and then for drivers maybe more, but that's the supply side of the marketplace. Here we're talking about tens of trips per year, and that's something that can increase a lot the revenue of the company, and we can actually leverage the same type of users on supply side whilst bringing new users on demand side. And this product, we believe, can be very well combined as a part of intermodal solution. So you can imagine that you can take a train from Stockholm to Göteborg, and then your summer house is like 40 kilometers around. Then you can find actually still a private individual who is not willing to generate profit to take you from this train station to your house. It's not a typical use case for BlaBlaCar now. It's a use case that we want to develop, and it's something that we believe has a high chances of gaining traction. We started some experimentation on this topic last year, and this year scaling this a bit more in France, and then looking forward to scale that beyond. What's actually important here is that the average ticket size for this type of journey is also like 3-4 times bigger than for carpooling. So it's high frequency multiplied by higher basket size. I think it's a very interesting product for us. And I mean, it's a venture project, finance in-house. So might fail, but I think that it's rather going to fly. So that demonstrates a bit this end vision where basically you take a train, then you find a car that's taking you and your family to your final destinations as part of the intermodal trip. And just sharing what's the team behind that. So my colleagues from the exec team and our CEO I was leading the company, as you can see, people with already quite some experience at BlaBlaCar, combined with a new wave of executives who arrived over last year, has built a very complementary team that I'm very proud of. I think that's it. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Piotr. I'll kick off with a couple of questions, but feel free to raise your hand if you have any. So looking back at the last, call it 24 months, I think a big difference between BlaBla and many of our other portfolio companies that are presented here today is that you guys were coming out of a pretty rough time with the pandemic. You had, it went from negative 51 million in EBIT to positive 35 last year. You grew revenues 2.5 times over that time period. Any general reflections of that period from being very close to the business, which you are?
Well, I think that this demonstrates honestly a strong resilience of carpool model. So in several markets, basically the carpool was basically not happening at all. Like it went to zero. And the moment COVID restrictions were lifted, actually without any stimulation from our side, users came back to the platform, kind of recognizing the brand, having very positive associations. And actually it was also showing higher resilience of this model versus other transportation models, because for them the lead time to put buses on the road or start operating trains and set the right model, set the right price was much longer. So that was a strong reflection of that period. Second thing, I think the great decision that was made with support of the board was that we would actually continue investing in our all initiatives, including the ones that actually are giving fruits now, connecting the buses around the world, preparing our technology to scale more. I think it was not an obvious bet, and not every board would support a management that take this decision. And I think that was a wise choice, and now we are gathering fruits of that. And third thing is what I mentioned earlier, is the strong operating leverage that BlaBlaCar has. So we probably can, optimize our operations, optimize our costs further. But I think as long as we are actually starting to deliver volumes on activity, we don't need to scale our cost base at all. So I think now the cost base that we have, we can probably double the BDA without any further investments.
Great, thank you. I'll jump in on one other, which is you touched upon it a bit in the presentation, but what share of GMV or PAX is monetized today, and how do you envision that evolving in the years to come? I think you mentioned some of the markets that might be on the horizon, but it would be good to get some more details on that.
So when you look at carpooling activity only, it's a bit more than a half of it is monetized. So still almost half of it to be monetized, which would, as I mentioned, flow directly into EBITDA thanks to a great gross margin of the business. If you look at the entire passenger side of the business, it's roughly 70% of it is monetized, 30% is not monetized, because bus business or train business is monetized from day one. Like we are generating revenue for every ticket sold. So the timeline, I think that the plan is that over this year and next year we would monetize Brazil, which is at that point our second biggest market in terms of activity. And then I think 26 we should think of monetizing India and the remainder of the markets. Then maybe in between we would squeeze in Mexico, which I believe is not as strategic as those two ones. And I think that key for us is to continue iterating around monetization product, which I think can be improved. and to minimize the impact of introducing like a paywall in the product, and to maintain the growth that's happening, because all those markets are growing. Like India at that point grows 100% year on year with like 1 million packs per month, for instance, and there's zero investments there. So they benefit, of course, from the global platform, all the processes that we've built, support that we provide to the users there centrally, but there is no marketing invested into that.
Very exciting. One question over here.
Lars Barner, thanks for your presentation. 2 questions. One is, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not entirely sure BlaBlaCar is integrated in Google Maps, or are there parts of the world where it is integrated in Google Maps?
Yeah. I think that's tricky. So there are different products in Google. Like we are just finalizing integration of our platform into Google Transport. With the long distance, we've been integrated now. I think you won't find this results. It's a bit tricky because at Google in the maps, they're insisting on having multiple offerings. And as we are the only long distance carpooling platform, there are some issues with that. But when we were there integrated there, it's not providing for such a big traffic to BlaBlaCar. So when you search on the map, and you would have like a train, bus. So our buses can be found, for instance, in Google Maps in markets where you have them, and Google Transport provides for us actually presenting other bus operators thanks to our interface connected to Google. But on Carpool, it's more tricky.
Got it. The second question is, I mean, I appreciate this like non-profit concept on carpooling, etc. But given that you expanded to buses and trains, wouldn't it make sense to include also kind of medium to long distance car transfers? I mean,
yes. I mean, then you enter into a fairly tricky regulatory space. Because in most of the markets, and especially in emerging markets, this space is occupied by a lot of gray zone, clandestine transportation. And once you start aggregating that, you expose yourself, because you're an easy target, as the main target of all the regulatory requests. And as a side effect, actually, as a collateral damage, you might actually be challenged on carpool front, which you'd like to avoid because of the economics that they displayed. So we looked into that. I think that in certain areas, like for instance, the door-to-door product that I displayed, I cannot exclude that in this product we would be working with a fully certified professional drivers. Like in France, for instance, where we are piloting this project, there is a supply and that we could work with, and that's legal, and that would not lead to us being challenged. So it's not that much ideological. It's more pragmatic and linked with regulatory aspect. If you do that in Brazil, I can reassure you that the day after you would have like a lot of minivans, and then all the legit bus operators would say, well, I stopped being distributed on your platform because you're promoting a clandestine transportation. And on top of that, you have carpool and we don't like it. And yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
We have a question in the back, but I'll jump in with one in between. I know when VNV invested in BlaBla the first time, was it 8 years ago or something? I think the take rate in France was somewhere around 10%, which is now above around 30%. So could you walk us through the evolution of the take rate when you enter a market and what that looks like currently?
I think it's a bit of a lesson learned. I think in France, indeed, we were starting with like a low, like 12-15% of take rate, and then you apply a VAT. So consumer facing, it's a bit more. Now we reached more like 22, 23, 24%. And basically, when we were launching new markets, we realized that the sensitivity to the amount of the fee is not so high. The biggest problem is to convince people to start paying in general, rather than to expose them either to 15 or 20 or 25% of the fee. So, I mean, there is a bit of art, a bit of science in that, but we have a take rate which is around 20% plus, which consumer facing is probably closer to 25% in all the markets.
At the
From the
get-go?
get-go, yeah. I don't like what we realize is that increasing the fee as a part of the monetization rollout is not the wisest thing. Would rather focus on scale on rolling it out through exposing more people and in a more smooth manner, rather than through offering them a lower take rate on general. I think it's not very wise, and this combined with our not very wise pricing, I think that it doesn't provide for most optimal experience from a revenue extraction standpoint.
Cool.
Thanks for a great presentation. Just a quick question related to the M&A strategy on buses and trains specifically. So just curious what like the main advantage you see in your own words that gives you versus building organically, you know, buy or build, that kind of question. Is it just speculating? Is it like long sales cycles with, you know, very bureaucratic operators, or is it like aggregators have a strong position in the value chain and have exclusive agreements with operators, or what's the main like unlock and advantage that gives you versus doing yourself?
I have a good question. I think that stepping back a bit, although it started in a different reality, most of the bus and train OTAs, they started between 15 and 10 years ago, and their path towards that numbers took them more or less that amount of time. Then you can blame the fact that they started in a different reality where there was much more of offline transactions, because what's the main objective of entering into a bus and train OTA is a different animal, but in bus OTA, you mostly target markets where you have still most of the transactions happening offline, and you basically accompany or accelerate the transition from offline to online. Yet most of the markets we look at are still at the fairly low levels. So even the players who are generating the 40, 50 million revenue are operating in markets where you have like a 10 to 25% of online sales. So there is a still significant amount of market that you can grab as a new entrant. Then I think that for us, the evaluation is simple. Even if we combine a carpool audience in those markets and expertise we are gradually building, and the fact that there is more online sales, but there is also more competitors, I think that it's much faster for us to gain traction and demonstrate that a scalable a multimodal platform globally by acquiring platforms. That being said, up until now, we are still growing organically. And in Brazil, I think that next year we should be like getting to 5 million packs starting in 2020 really. So it's not bad. But I think that you can accelerate this path much more. And on top of that, I think you can start looking into geographies where you are not so strong, and then combine the bus OTA with expanding with carpool offering. So it opens more opportunities as well.
We have a question over here from Jake.
Thanks. You mentioned dynamic pricing as a topic. Could you just say more about what the idea is there, like how that you might still be working through the plans, but how that could work? Or?
No, it's already being implemented in some markets. So basically, as I mentioned, the basic model of BlaBlaCar is that as a driver, you publish a ride. We propose you a recommended price. You have some range within which you can change it. This price is always the same. So whether it's a Wednesday morning, 5 a.m. or Friday afternoon before a long weekend, it's the same price that we suggest to the driver. Then the driver, some of the drivers who are more frequent ones, they have developed their own intelligence in pricing, and then they know when basically you can increase the price. They would rarely decrease the price. That's a problem. So when we look at the average like prices that are declared by drivers, you would see that like they only go up or they stay at the average recommended price, or they increase it. And the issue we see with that is, I mean, none of the transportation players in the reality of competition play that game. They usually adjust the price to demand and supply available on the market. So the way how it works is basically, it doesn't sound very sophisticated, but basically we are mapping the pricing of the competitive means of transportation, using this either as a point of reference for defining prices on legs which are not exposed to competition, or actually as a point of reference to people who are traveling on the same routes where bus or train is traveling. And then the driver would adopt that, and then passenger would be exposed to this. We did different tests. I think the challenge on our side is that we cannot take full control over price, because we still want to give drivers feeling that they control the price. But more importantly, I think that the moment you take full control over price, you are also exposing yourself to a bit of regulatory challenges.
Thanks. We have one final question, I think, from JJ again.
Thanks again. Just two very quick questions. First, just roughly ballpark, what % of top line today is carbon credit offsets? Just roughly.
What's the
Carbon credits, what % of revenue is that roughly?
Honestly, I'm not exposed to this topic that much, but I think that we communicated on that publicly. If I recall well, it was around 20%.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And just curious, since that's, I mean, roughly entirely margin, just curious how you think about kind of the sustainability of that revenue stream and kind of risks and opportunities of that going ahead, just on a high level.
I think risks are obvious. These are schemes that are not a product of consumer demand. It's political solutions that are addressing a lot of different issues depending on the market. So they're evolving. You need to be in a dialogue with administration, politicians. So it's a different game than the game of building a product for consumers. But I think we are successfully playing this game since 15 years. So I'm confident that we can continue doing that. Which doesn't mean that there won't be any setbacks along the road and changes and so on. I think we should just do our job and make sure that this is something that stays with us. Although I hope that over time there will be other revenue streams that would make this much more marginal in BlaBlaCar's P&L. On the other hand, on opportunity side, those schemes in Europe are regulated at European level, and the implementation in different countries is at different stages. But we are already progressing with leveraging similar scheme, and we have in France and Spain, and there are other markets in which we could follow. On the other side, as I mentioned, we are also exploring carbon credits. So outside of Europe, there is no framework on energy efficiency certificates, but there are well-implemented carbon credit saving schemes, and we are looking into that. I think that towards the year end, we should have some answers from some of the geos, some of the biggest geos we operate in.
Thanks.
Super. One final. What did you have a question there? No. Okay. Final question from me on trends. We've talked about trends for a while. Where are we in rolling that out, and how important will it become in the years to come?
As I said, I'm quite excited. We sold our first train ticket in Spain last week, so it's about to grow. I think at that point, it's most of the focus is to prove that in Spain. Spain is the place to be in terms of train aggregation, because the market got liberalized. There is more players, ideal scenario for an OTA, and we know that our audience has a high affinity with low cost, fast trains. So we believe that it's a great market to be, and we would invest there further. And then we would think of scaling that. I think for a long time France was our primary target, but seeing an opportunity in Spain, we kind of changed the gear and changed the direction. So France would be for sure one of the next markets. Once we build a solution for consumers, I think the train product can be very easily scaled across Europe, and engine for connecting as well. So I'm confident we can scale it to more markets.
Perfect. With that, thank you very much, Piotr.
Oh, thank you.